Heat of fusion is the energy required to change between solid and liquid phases, aka melting. Heat of vaporization is the energy required to change between liquid and gas phases, aka boiling. So I have some heat of fusion and heat of vaporization values for you. For heat of fusion, you're going to use 6.01 kilojoules per mole if you're given moles in your problem, or 334 joules per grams if you're given grams in your problem. For heat of vaporization, you're going to use 40.7 kilojoules per mole if you're given moles, and 2260 joules per grams if you're given grams, okay? So you need to make sure that you use the correct value depending on whether or not you're melting or boiling, and depending on whether or not you're starting with moles or grams. Okay, so our practice problem says how much energy would be required to melt 200 grams of ice. So we're going to start with 200 grams of ice, and we're going to use the heat of fusion value because we are melting, okay? And since we're starting out with grams, we're going to use 334 joules per grams. Notice how our units are canceling out, so we're going to be left with joules in our answer. Okay, and the second part of the problem says how much heat is needed to boil 3.2 moles of water. So I'm going to start with 3.2 moles of water, and I'll use heat of vaporization because I'm boiling. The heat of vaporization value that I'm going to use is 40.7 kilojoules per mole because then my units will cancel out diagonally, okay? And the unit that I will be left with will be in kilojoules. Okay, so notice how, depending on whether or not you're using the grams versus the moles values, your final units will be left in either joules or kilojoules. So you'll need to convert this to kilojoules if that is what your question is asking for. But you won't need to do that for the moles value.